All it takes is one glance at this film's IMDb page for it to become abundantly clear that the events upon which this film was based were very important to a lot of top-tier Hollywood talent, and the report gained so much because of their involvement. Not only did we have Adam Driver headlining, but we had Annette Bening, John Hamm, Michael C. Hall, Tim Blake Nelson, Corey Stoll, Matthew Rhys, Jennifer Morrison, and more in these supporting roles. And I mean, all these actors have quite capably headlined in their own films and television shows and just brought so much to this film. And indeed, when your film is almost 100% comprised of people sitting in cramped offices, either conversing with one another or just reading documents, you need brilliant performers to breathe life and drama into those moments. And we'll discuss the script itself in just a little bit, but every single one of those previously mentioned actors, without exception, just elevated what was on the page, bringing extra levels of nuance and depth, and really allowing me to sympathize and even sometimes empathize with the real-life individuals involved in these events. And of course, I can't compliment the acting without at least tipping my hat to the film's director, Scott Burns, who assembled that cast as well as guided each of them towards grounded and believable performances. I should also commend Mr. Burns, who also wrote the screenplay, for handling the material in a fairly unbiased way, and, as far as I could tell anyways, a pretty accurate representation of what actually happened. Though there certainly were political parties and bureaus and individuals who were presented as more monstrous than others, Mr. Burns also did a pretty solid job of presenting how the other side was also decently culpable. And in the end, there did seem to be a decently fair assessment of how we all are responsible for the way that we interrogated and tortured terrorist prisoners after 9/11, and then subsequently sought to cover up, or at least justify those actions. And that is just a very difficult needle to thread. This film will inevitably make a lot of people mad on both sides of the political spectrum, and that the filmmakers, because of that, didn't shy away from this story, well, in my opinion, it's worth saying bravo and thank you for pressing into it and giving us something that I think is important to be given. On top of that, though, purely from an artistic standpoint, true life stories like this one are just inherently extremely hard to tell well. The reason being, stories like this one just jam the storyteller in between this rock and this hard place. On one side is the responsibility to get the story right, to get the facts right, a responsibility that I do think the filmmakers should feel. Whether it's healthy or not, they do have to realize that most of their audience will walk out of their film believing that what they just saw was completely factual and accurate. And because of that, the filmmakers have to not only worry about communicating the facts, but communicating them clearly and as unbiasedly as they possibly can. To do that, and to do that well, there has to be this unending discussion about what events must absolutely be included in their film and which ones need not be. And then which of those events just have to be presented in chronological order, and then which ones can be rearranged and presented in some sort of nonlinear fashion. And I'm sure there are many more questions to consider when trying to get the story and get the facts right. And again, that's just on one side of the equation. The other side is actually trying to figure out how to tell a compelling and interesting story. To go from telling just sort of a news article or making a documentary of sort into an actual narrative drama. One with an intentional structure and flow, and more importantly, with conflict, both external and internal, and a satisfying resolution, rather than just presenting the audience with a list of interesting events. And that challenge was only heightened in the report because the events that they were covering spanned over a decade, which really forced them to just sprint just to include the facts of the case in their film. Consequently, never once were the filmmakers able to really slow and show any genuine nuance, either to the narrative or to the characters. As such, they were confined to these types and shadows versus to something that felt real and specific. Yes, there were moments where the characters were verbally expositing what was kind of going on behind the scenes, but again, we were never given time to actually see those things, those events and feelings that were happening behind the scenes in their life that would have brought so much to the film. like how this entire experience was affecting them on a human level. All of that was only ever talked about, and talked about very sparingly. There was, for example, one moment where Driver's Daniel Jones was talking to another character and explaining to him that at one point he had had a girlfriend before he was kind of forced to give his life away to the study of the torture report. But we, the audience, were never allowed to actually meet that individual, and as such, never allowed to feel any genuine loss when they allegedly broke up. Similarly, when one of Jones's concerned colleagues later in the film asked him, "Don't you see what this is doing to you?" all I could really think was, "I sure don't." The line really did have zero resonance for me because, for all intents and purposes, the Adam Driver character looked and felt the exact same way he did 90 minutes before. Now, even though I don't think it would have been some sort of magical fix-all, I do think it would have been very helpful were the report to have a slightly narrower focus, allowing the news articles and documentaries to provide us with the larger story and more holistic picture. And then this film might have had the time and space to delve, more successfully anyways, into the hearts and minds of those involved in these events. The hearts and minds on every side. In an interesting way, I'm pretty sure the more narrow the focus and more specific things got in this film, the more actually universal and respectful to the actual events the whole film would have become. As it was, though, this ended up kind of just being this long-winded montage featuring really great performers turning in pretty solid performances, all of which culminated in the cliche "we can do better" speech, underscored by some very saccharine music. And for all these reasons, I will give the film a 3 out of 5. I would still love to know what you guys thought of the film, though, so definitely comment below and let me know. And I'm also curious, what is one of your favorite political thrillers? I think for me, All the President's Men is way up there, as well as Oliver Stone's JFK. Finally, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.